Continue now with that discussion, talking more about the issues around accommodation in our universities in South Africa. And we're now joined in studio by EFF YC, or of course the youth wing of the EFF. He is a member of the Central Youth Interim Leadership Corps. His name is Udiretsi Maseba. Udiretsi, thank you so much for your time this evening here on SABC News. I mean, you saw me there speaking to Paseka, really painting a painful picture when it comes to some of the challenges facing university students in the country. Maybe tell us about your experience. I mean, he tabled to us some of the issues around NSFAS and issues around off-campus residence, and really some of these accommodation residences not even giving students the necessary safe, sometimes the accommodation, as well as basically just even issues around the type of living residences that students sometimes are often made to live under. Tell us, when it comes to some of those students that you represent, what are the challenges that you have come across speaking to them?
Sure. No, thank you very much for having us in Bali. I think let's start here. 500,000 is the amount of the bed deficit across the country when it comes to student accommodation. 500,000. Then we go to 25,000, which is the current amount of beds that NSFAS is accredited for student accommodation. Now, roughly speaking, if you take Wits University, you take the University of Johannesburg, you take Nelson Mandela University, you are speaking about 119,900 students in 3 universities in one of the most prominent metros. You start to realize that the housing deficit is far above what the current department policies and the NSFAS policy and targets can match.
So what are the urgent interventions then which are needed to address this plight? Because it's quite clear here there is a big shortfall when it comes to accommodation.
I don't know why agency must only be urgent when we are on TV. Because in 2017, the EFF Student Command wrote a program entitled it Accommodation is Land, which was entirely faced on addressing the issues of student accommodations in institutions of higher learning across both universities and the TVET sector. Why is this matter urgent now? Because it was urgent in 2016 when members of the EFF in the Johannesburg Metropolitan Council tabled a motion expropriating abandoned buildings in order to convert them into student accommodations. It's urgent to you guys. It has been urgent to us since 2016. This is nearly 10 years ago.
Beauty Eurasia International Cosmetic Exhibition will be held from 18 to the 20th of June in
This is nearly 10 years ago. The crisis that is now currently facing students has been facing them for almost 10 years. And the conversation was never really as, immediate as when the EFF made it 10 or 9 years ago. So Paseka can speak how he wants to speak because maybe he just, entered the leadership space. The EFF has been on the center of student accommodation crisis across this country for more than 10 years, actually.
Why is it not being addressed according to your standards? Because, I mean, when you speak, to the Department of Education or Higher Education in that regard, I mean, they will say that, much has been done by certain businesses to even turn some buildings in the CBD into student accommodation. Paseka, they're also, touching on the issues around, looking at a number of dilapidated buildings in the Johannesburg CBD in particular that can still be turned into more student accommodation, because it's quite clear we need way more than what we have.
So which political party has addressed that? Which political party has focused resources, has focused manpower research into dealing with that? It has been the EFF. As we speak right now, there is a monopoly growing within the sector of youth, of student accommodation. You've got South Point, which nationally has about 10,000 beds, You've got Growth Point that has recently partnered with Finstra, a very big accommodation provider. You've got Rise. You've got the Res Public. These are the big four of student accommodation. These companies are now partnering with one another in order to make sure that they are going to monopolize the student accommodation sector and raise prices. NSFAS does not give you a fraction of what these student accommodation private providers charge students. The EFF has said across metropolitans, let municipality councils take over rates, give special incentives to student accommodation providers in order to make sure that we try and mitigate the gap between what NSFAS gives students and what those private accommodation providers actually charge.
Yeah, and when it comes to these private accommodation, which is available, across the country to a number of universities, when it comes to these issues that you are raising, saying that, the prices are exorbitant, they are quite high, it's unaffordable, and the likes of NSFAS can't even really cover some of, the monies that they are charging. What are you doing to raise some of these issues with the Higher Education Department, as well as, bringing on board NSFAS?
What we are doing is what we've been consistently doing. We are calling for municipalities to go into a special arrangement when it comes to these private accommodation providers, to say, incentivize this. Because there is no way that someone who's an NSFAS beneficiary can now be understood automatically as someone who's outside of the bracket that the government has said these are indigent individuals coming from indigent households. At UNISA, the accommodation stipend, in fact, the living stipend, the living allowance that NSFAS gives to an average UNISA student is 310 rand. Because the understanding is that UNISA is a long-distance institution. Yeah. And then because of that, students who studied UNISA don't have accommodation allowances. At VETS, the most expensive res is in your 120,000s. NSFAS is only willing to give us 67,000 per year. The EFF has been consistently calling for municipalities to go into a special arrangement with private accommodation providers.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. That is EFF YC member of the Central Youth Interim Leadership Corps, Udiritsi Masebe. They're just talking to us about some of the challenges that many students encounter when it comes to accommodation. Also calling on municipalities to collaborate, with some of these, these universities, as well as the likes of NSFAS, to also address the issues around affordability of